Good afternoon, and I hope you're having a fantastic day. Please take note of the title. It said goat meat with curry, not Jamaican curry goat, which by the way is a very, very complicated recipe with exquisite result. Jamaican curry goat is really very, very good. No, because I like to emphasize the fact that cooking is a creative art, and I try to encourage people to cook using their own creativity. I deliberately did not want this to look like Jamaican curry goat. Besides, I did use yellow yam in my recipe because I like yellow yam. Okay, here we go. I left the label on so you could see what it cost me here in Virginia Beach. It's 1.12 pounds at $3.99 a pound. Now, goat meat is a very lean meat, and because it is, it has to be cooked for a very long time. In my case, I used potato. In Jamaica, it's called Irish potato. I don't know why, really. But anyway, I used potato because that's going to end up being my gravy. Of course, because I like to use certain seasoning, you may choose the ones that you like. I use thyme and I use Scotch bonnet pepper. I use half of a Scotch bonnet pepper. In addition to that, I also use one sweet pepper because I like that flavor. Now, you can be as creative as you want to be. As a matter of fact, I encourage you to be creative. As I said earlier, I like to use certain seasoning. I like thyme, I like onions, I like garlic, I like Scotch bonnet pepper. And I like sweet pepper. So, this is where I suggest and I encourage you to use your creativity and add the seasonings that you like. As I said, what can it harm? If this is something that you like, then of course add it now, so that it'll really permeate the meat. And again, remember what I said, this has to be cooked for 2 hours, maybe 2.5 hours. Then you add your other stuff, like your additional seasoning, and then cook it for another 40, maybe an hour. It does take a long time to cook. It's so lean. Can you see on the screen how lean that is? Very little or no fat. What you're looking at is the bone in between the meat. That's goat meat for you. One more thing. Just about every country will have their own specific way of preparing goat meat. Anyway, once everything is in the pot at this stage, then I add enough water to cover everything, because now, once it's covered, I'm going to bring everything to a boil. And it's gonna boil for about 2 hours, maybe 2.5 hours. Remember, goat meat requires a long cooking time. Also note that I did not add any salt. We'll do that later, okay? You'll add your salt later. Anyway, in the pot goes, everything is covered with water. My seasoning is there, thyme, Scotch bonnet pepper, and so forth. I also added a surprise ingredients which you'll see later. But for now, you see that stuff on the top? You can either leave it or you can skim it off. It's entirely up to you. So, when you put the lid on, it's going to cook for about 2.5 hours, as I said before. Get a fork and check it after 2.5 hours to make sure the meat is thoroughly cooked. While you're cooking this, and this is important, everything is going to bubble up to the top of your pot like that. Now you're going to have a choice. You can either leave it there or you can put a crack in the lid just like that to let the steam escape. But even then, you need to check it often, okay? You can also cook it with the lid off if you promise to watch it often, because it's gonna boil down and you're gonna need to add water frequently. So you can either have the lid off or you can have the lid on. It's entirely up to you. Just remember, it's a process that's gonna be taking a long time. In my case, after the 2.5 hours, I added an additional amount of onion and my secret ingredient, 1 can of really cheap beer. I love the taste of beer on goat meat. That's just my thing. Now is also a very good time to stir it well and to add salt to taste. This is something that you can check later. My other secret ingredient that I added was yellow yam, the food of Usain Bolt. Now, when you handle yam, be very careful with that knife because yam is very, very slippery. Now, I added the yam after 2.5 hours of cooking, and then I allowed it to cook for an additional 40 minutes. I also added the curry at this time. Okay, the proper way to add curry, of course, was to add it in the beginning. Here I'm adding it towards the end. And of course, once again, once you add it and you add the salt to taste and all that, you want to stir it well. Right? Stir everything well, and of course cook it for an additional 40 minutes or so, perhaps an hour. Let it simmer down, as they say. Let it simmer down. I would recommend that you don't put the lid on, unless of course you really, really want to. Just watch it carefully. That's what I'd recommend. So there you have it, my goat meat with curry. In the end, it turned out pretty good. It was not as good as it could have been, but the idea is, what I want to encourage you to do is to be creative. See the yellow yam? Good. Of course, I served in a bit of rice, and it was okay.